I was asked by a subscriber the following question. So victims of the slave trade who are consequently lighter through no fault of their own and identify with Africa are not African. The answer to that question is yes, they are not African. Many African people have a hard time understanding and accepting the clear, reasonable conclusion that for Africans to survive, they must not be inclusive. Africans can't consider Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Bob Marley, Asa Hilliard, and of course Barack Obama an African/Black, since to do so devalues African people's racial continuity with our ancestors. Also, keep in mind that many of these people's parents chose freely to procreate with non-Africans. Two obvious examples are Bob Marley's mother and Barack Obama's father. Before this discussion can start, we need to clarify some definitions. What is an authentic African? What is an authentic mulatto? What is an authentic white person? How do these distinct individual groups look, no matter if they were to live on the continent of Africa, in the USA, or Brazil? Let us first define African people. When one views the ancient African art, i.e. from the Nubians, Nok, Mankunde, Yorubu, Igbo, Ukwu, there's actually a cornucopia of different noses, heads, eyes, limbs, torsos, and lip sizes shown. This should be expected since all of the races are but diluted variations of the African race family, to put it in layman's terms. This is a reasonable assumption since evolutionists have stated that humankind came forth from East Africa, around the areas of Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Okay, but in general, how did the African man and woman from time immemorial look? What were the distinct features and traits that would deem them African? Well, one trait was skin color. African people have a range of color within the brown to black spectrums. Thus, their skin could be brown, bronze, dark reddish brown, darker nut brown, or dark chocolate colored. However, the crowning trait is the peppercorn hair. What I mean by that is African textured hair. What is a white person? Well, a white person would be non-African. But moreover, let's get a reference from one of my favorite racist philosophers, Arthur Schopenhauer. He describes the white race in his magna opus, The World as Will and Representation, page 547, in this way. Incidentally, it is my conviction that a white skin is not natural to man, and that by nature he has either a black or brown skin, like our forefathers, the Hindus, and that the white man was never originally created by nature, and that, therefore, there is no race of white people, much as it is talked about, but every white man is a bleached one, driven up into the north, where he was a stranger. Now that we have a solid idea of what a white person is, what is a mulatto? A mulatto, plainly stated, is a person with a black parent and a white parent. However, there are variants between both poles. I will not discuss musties, sambos, or mestizos, since, as I stated before, these are diluted variations of African people, to put it in layman's terms. That being said, there are a few talking points that non-Africans, mulattoes, white people, that is, liberal about sex white people, and even authentic African people use so as to promote the idea of there being no such thing as race. Number one, they remind us that everyone is African. However, this cannot be the case since racial differences are the results of patterns of differences in gene frequency. Number two, They point out that Africans in America are 20% white. However, the participants for this study were self-identified Africans. Thus, many of the people could have been 1/8 black, or maybe they just enjoyed listening to R&B. Mark Thomas, a professor of evolutionary genetics at the University College of London, states that the truth is that there is usually little scientific substance to most of these studies, as well as DNA take-home tests, that these studies are better to be thought of as genetic astrology tests. I will repeat. He believes that companies and researchers that do DNA analysis are participating in genetic astrology. Mark Thomas continues, claims that 20% of African Americans are mixed are usually based on only two sections of DNA, the mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited solely through the female line, and the male line equivalent, the Y chromosome. It is possible to compare these and make reasonable estimates of how long ago individuals share a common ancestor through the male or female line. However, such estimates are usually rather imprecise. But saying where and in what ethnic group the common ancestor lived is considerably more speculative. For example, in the hands of genetic ancestry testing companies, this speculation almost invariably comes from the murky world of interpretive phylogeography, an approach to reading or genetic history that is easily steered by subjective bases and biases, has never been scientifically shown to work, and in some forms has been explicitly shown not to work. So saying that Oprah Winfrey has Zulu mitochondrial DNA is just storytelling. Stories are fine if it is made clear that this is what they are, but science isn't about telling stories, it's about testing them. In science, we prefer the term hypothesis testing. The simplicity of how Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA are inherited is part of their appeal in ancestry testing. You don't have to worry about the inconvenient doubling of your ancestors with each generation back in time. You only have one father, one father's father, etc. But the price of that simplicity is irrelevance. Those two lineages represent a rapidly diminishing fraction of your ancestry. The further back in time you go, it may be the case that your mitochondrial DNA lineage came to Britain with the Vikings, although that would be extremely difficult to demonstrate scientifically. But if true, this would still say very little about your origins. I say all this to say that DNA analysis is in its early forms, which means that it is not reliable. And we should not believe every study that comes out of nowhere and repeat it as valid.